Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm John DeLonge. I'm at the bottom of the screen. So I've been a solution consultant with DataDirect for quite a few years. Based in Europe, looking after all the DataDirect Connect products, both for OEM and direct. Paul?
And I'm Paul Griffin. Worked in technical support, solutions consulting for several years, as well as marketing, and now I'm in the product group. So what we want to present today is the value of high-performing Type 5 JDBC drivers. We want to talk about, as well, the cloud, access to the cloud through standards-based connectivity, JDBC. And if you want to click next.
Sorry.
Oh, that's all right. So what I'm going to talk about is the DataDirect JDBC drivers, what we have with our Type 5 JDBC, the benefits that your application can realize, your application users and your customers can realize by using our JDBC premium drivers. And then John is going to talk about what our cloud data source offerings are today, as well as actually show you a live demo of what we can do with Salesforce.com and JDBC. And then we're going to give you a preview of our DataDirect Cloud. If you've been to our booth, you've probably seen some of the graphics and diagrams of a really exciting program we're starting next year. So we'll show you, we'll talk a little bit about that too. So who is DataDirect? Progress DataDirect. DataDirect was founded in 1988. We've been in business nearly 25 years. Standards-based data access has been our business for 25 years. And we were acquired by Progress in 2003, so Progress software you may be familiar with. And most of the operations for DataDirect, support, development, etc., are done outside of our offices in India, the US, and our local office here in Duffel, Belgium. And we've gone under a host of names in our 25 years. I won't go through each and every one of those, but we are part of Progress Software. So one of the biggest reasons we're the leader in data access is our depth and breadth of offerings. So any data source, or excuse me, any application on any platform to any data source. So whether it's a data warehouse, such as Greenplum, Teradata, Sybase IQ, or a cloud data source, such as SQL Azure, Salesforce.com, Database.com, or a traditional relational database that we all know, like Oracle, SQL Server, DB2, Sybase. We can connect to it, regardless of what platform, whether it's Linux, Unix, Windows, and any application that can take an ODBC or JDBC driver, we can connect to your data. So what is JDBC Type 5? So for those familiar with the evolution of JDBC, the Type 2 drivers that the database vendors introduced required database client software. So it's really two pieces of software that you had to install, maintain, configure, instead of one for Type 2. And then with Type 3 and Type 4, they eliminated that performance blocking database client library piece and had basically a driver without a database client library. With Type 5, we kick that up a notch. So instead of just having a driver that doesn't require a database client library, we have higher standards for our drivers. We want to have high-performing drivers, application failover, bulk load, security features, tuning, performance tuning in your application. What's interesting today is there are so many different types of applications, so many different types of operations that applications can do, that the idea that one driver can fit all is just not going to work nowadays. We have business intelligence applications that do analysis and reporting. We have reporting applications. We have ETL applications. Having options within the driver to be able to more closely align your application with your database is critical to having the best performing, most reliable data connectivity. So again, Type 5, codeless configuration, enabling your application to do things, additional things, without having to write lines and lines and lines of code and having to test that code, support that code, and do all the other things. You can just set a connection option in the driver. Things like bulk load, application failover, performance tuning. Additionally, unrestricted performance. So with the performance tuning options, like I was saying just a second ago, aligning your application, whether it's BI, ETL, or reporting, closer to your database means better performance and a better experience for your customers and your users. Resource efficiency. How many folks have used or are using a virtualized environment? Use VMware. See a few people out there. A lot of folks are either using it or moving towards it, and resource efficiency is critical. So if you have the same throughput with two drivers and one is using far more resources, the performance at the end of the day is going to be very different. All-in-one deployment. Again, no database client libraries. And the streamlined standard, that's the thing. There are other drivers that don't require database client libraries, but then when you start to scratch the surface and say, okay, well, I want to support Kerberos in my application. Oh, well, we support Kerberos, but you have to use our Type 2 driver to get that support. All of a sudden, when you're starting to use what's called advanced features that everyone needs and that are must-haves, then you have to start reverting backward to the Type 2 driver in many cases. With our drivers, no database client libraries and all the advanced functionality that application users demand today. It's like performance. How many of us have ever heard someone say, you know, the application can take its time, we can wait? No one ever says that, right? Everyone wants the data as soon as they can get it.
Okay.
So some of the key features, as I said before, any application on any platform to any database, we have multiple data sources that we can support, and up here is just a few. Sybase, DB2, Informix, SQL Server, like I said, data warehouses, relational databases, cloud data sources, more and more cloud data sources that we support. And again, it's compliant with the latest spec, and it's standards-based, includes those performance tuning options and all the enhancements that application users require. And again, without the database client libraries, which means better performance, easier to code. You can code to the JDBC spec. You don't have to worry about coding some proprietary database option when you're coding your application to a specific, for example, Oracle or DB2 or SQL Server. You just code to the JDBC spec, and whatever driver you're putting in, you'll be able to connect to that database. So if, for example, someone was migrating their application from Oracle to DB2, for example, they could take the Oracle driver out, put the DB2 driver in, and connect immediately. There will be really no migration if the application is written to the JDBC standard and you're using our drivers. So we call ourselves the Switzerland of databases, database agnostic. So we're neutral. We can connect to any database. And again, too, you don't have to test against multiple versions of a client. If you've ever used clients with ODBC or JDBC, you know that, for example, Oracle 9, 8, 9, 10, and 11 all have different clients, probably more than one driver for all four of those. With our driver, today's JDBC driver from DataDirect supports Oracle 8, 9, 10, and 11 with just one driver and no database clients. So that reduces testing and applications, as well as deployment headaches.
Okay.
So one thing that we wanted to point out is that we do have a partnership with Jboss. We are the only suite of drivers that are certified with Jboss. We have, it's part of the JEMS, which includes Tomcat and Hibernate. And we have a partnership as well for support. So if a customer calls in and says, hey, I'm using Jboss, and the issue they report we determine is something more to do with the application side, then instead of saying, hey, you're going to have to call Jboss, we can call Jboss and work with them collaboratively to resolve the issue. So there's no finger pointing. We work very well together. We're very well aligned. And again, configuration support for Jboss and Hibernate. We have several articles on our website and in our blogs on how to configure our drivers with Hibernate and Jboss.
Oh, sorry.
So got a little preview there. The application to the database, and you see in the middle there's a pipe. This is a common view of what a driver does, that it's merely a pipe between an application and a database through which the data flows. And it's a common misconception. It's as long as the pipe's there, it doesn't matter whether it's leaking or broken, or as long as it's there, we can get the data to where we need, we can connect. But if you have X-ray vision, or if the slide were forward it a little too fast, and you would see this. The driver does so many things, from at the very bottom, the data encryption across the network, to bulk load, to SQL upleveling, Unicode support, failover support, socket management. We actually have this graphic on our website, and for each one of those boxes, there's a link to a page that explains in more depth exactly what the driver does. But as you can see, there are a lot of functions of the driver, and that's why performance will often depend on what kind of driver you have. Several times we've had customers come to us and they say, we have a memory leak. They switch out the driver, and all of a sudden their memory leak is gone. So the driver really does serve a big function, and determines a big part of how your application is going to function with your database.
Yeah.
So, and to add to that, 75% and potentially more of the time in a well-tuned application, of the transaction time in a well-tuned application, will be actually spent in the driver. So a lot of folks don't know that, and that's a big part of, if folks will change their application or they'll tune their database and still think, well, how can I get better performance? What's going on here? And a lot of folks don't know it is the driver that's causing a performance bottleneck. The network is the driver. The driver is the network. They're both synonymous. The driver really does determine how traffic is going to happen across the network between the application and the database. And to illustrate, we hear performance and scalability. You probably have heard that a dozen times at this show from a lot of different folks. And the feedback that I get is, I don't want to hear about performance unless you can show me. And we do have a free evaluation version of the drivers on our website, so you can always test in your own environment, and that is, there's no substitute for that. But we have a performance lab. In fact, we spend a couple $1 million a year in our performance lab because performance is so important to our customers. And we do performance graphs to determine, where do we stand on performance. And this one happens to be the Oracle JDBC driver, the DataDirect Oracle JDBC driver versus the competitor. And as you can see here, the higher bars almost make the smaller bars look like insignificant, but every single one of those smaller bars are double digit, the smallest being 18%. And you can see for the drill down and monthly report as 500 and 800%. So that's the improvement we see in our performance lab when we compare our driver, our Oracle driver, with the competitor. And here's the thing. Again, if you test in your environment, you may get different results, but we would expect out of the gate, out of the box, a double-digit improvement in performance. And with our performance tuning options, that increase could go even higher. But if you're getting better throughput and using more resources, it's not doing you a whole lot of good. So we also test resource efficiency, rows per CPU cycle. So this next graph talks about memory savings. Again, higher numbers are better. This is, for example, in the orange, more efficient in memory savings, the DataDirect driver, Oracle, versus the competitor. So as you can see, several different tests were higher in a couple places, I think, 4 digits, 2287 for a CLOB insert in terms of memory usage. We're that much more efficient. And then when you're talking about rows per CPU cycle, that's going to be in the green, and as you can see, there's a minimal of double digits. So when you combine the throughput, the memory usage, and the CPU cycle efficiencies all together, what you have is a much better performance, and what you basically have is your application doing a whole lot more using a whole lot less. So here's another throughput example, and this one is SQL Server. The SQL Server, the DataDirect SQL Server JDBC driver versus the competitor. Again, if you see the throughput, the lowest here I think is 18%, and you have the highest at 79%, but in every single one of them, you're seeing significant performance improvements in throughput. But again, throughput is not the only thing that you would measure in performance. You definitely want to look at resource savings as well, and that's in our next chart. Again, the green is CPU cycles, and the orange is memory savings. And here we have some pretty impressive numbers, several that are 4 digits, where you're seeing not only better throughput, again, doing much, much more with far less. So in a virtualized environment, this assumes a greater significance, although it's significant in any environment. So again, the key features, any application, any platform, any data source, like I was saying, we can connect anything to anything in a standards-based JDBC way. Also, we test under production conditions. Like I told you before, we spend a couple $1 million a year on our performance lab. Well, we also have over 80 million tests in our test suite for all of our drivers and database versions. So we test the drivers thoroughly. That's why Jboss partnered with us. That's why so many application vendors embed our drivers in their application. And just to name one example of our connection options with performance is the connection pool manager. You can determine how many pools you have, how many connections in each pool. You can re-authenticate users that log out. Again, this helps performance in a big way. So bulk load is key. When you're trying to insert large amounts of data, having bulk load as an option is really important. We've had several customers who don't have bulk load in their application, actually ETL customers who don't have bulk load in their application, who have licensed and distributed our drivers primarily because of the bulk load functionality. I mean, where else but an ETL situation would bulk load be the most valuable? It's valuable in any insert situation, but when you're talking about an ETL where you're trying to move large amounts of data, this is huge. So it's available for many of our data sources, and you can import data as well. You can import it into a CSV file, but the big news for the bulk load is when you're trying to export data, when you're trying to insert data from your application or one database to another. It can go across databases or from an application into a database. For example, we have a customer who basically does collections, and they would get these huge text files that would need to go into their database. Well, what they collect from these customers in the first 30 days is where they make their largest commission. So if they didn't collect for 60 days or 90 days, they would make less money. So in order to get the collection agents to be able to call the customers, the data had to be in the database. So if the data took 2 weeks to get into the database, guess what? Not much of that money is going to be collected in the first 30 days. The company loses money. We were able to cut that down from 6 days to 24 hours to get all these huge multi-million row text files into their database using our bulk load. And we actually have it in our Windows. We have a ODBC administrator. We have a GUI where you can actually just stream data straight from one database to another. It's really easy. We have sample applications, including a bulk sample, where you can actually just quickly go in, download the driver, set up the bulk application, and probably in about 15 or 20 minutes kind of see exactly how it works. Security. Everyone's talking about security, especially since every day we hear about our data being breached in some way. I mean, all of our passwords for LinkedIn ended up on a Russian blog site a few months ago, and it's like, well, the perception is, whether it's right or wrong, when there's a security breach, we immediately assume there's a company out there rolling the dice with our data and taking chances. So it's really important that everything that a customer can do, they do in order to maintain the best security. And that's why we offer Kerberos as well as SSL and several other security features, and support of IPv6 as well. And again, this is one of those options where no database clients are required. You do have some database vendor drivers that say, hey, we do support Kerberos and we do have a clientless driver, but you can't have the two at the same time. If you want Kerberos, you're going to have to use our Type 2 driver, which means extra installations, extra database client libraries, performance limiting functionality, and a deployment headache. So high availability and load balancing, none of that's even relevant if we can't keep our connection, right? So having that reliability, I went to a financial services show a little while back and heard about Knight Capital. I'm sorry, not Knight Capital. It was in the Japanese stock market. The trading actually went down for 30 minutes because of a software glitch. When you have when you need reliable data connectivity, that's where we come in. So our load balancing distributes the loads across multiple servers. We have connection failover, which ensures your connection would go to an alternate server if it failed. We have an additional extended failover to where it basically looks like just a transaction failure, like the transaction would get rolled back and would start again. And then our extended select failover basically means if you were trying to select, say, 1,000 rows, and all of a sudden your connection went down on row 500, it would resume, after establishing a connection with an alternate server, it would resume with row 501 and then finish your transaction. So it looks to the user like it never even failed. So at this point in time, before we go into the demo pieces and the Salesforce.com, we'd like to see if anybody has any questions on our Java JDBC offerings. Yes, sir. That would be an excellent assumption to make, yes. So basically, the database vendors are the drivers that most folks are using, or they're using other drivers are using the database vendor drivers if they're not using us. And so yes, we typically compare against the database vendors. In that case, it was Microsoft. Any other questions? No?
Okay.
All right, John.
Okay, so I'm actually going to do a bit of pointing and clicking in because I'm going to be up and down. So, a couple of questions. The first one, who's heard of Salesforce.com? Come on. That's very good. But more importantly, who is here because they've got Salesforce.com? Oh, you got a couple. Oh, got a few. Okay, so ODBC and JDBC is relevant all over the place in a wide variety of applications. So if you've got an ODBC and a JDBC tool, you've got a reporting infrastructure. And then someone says, oh, well, we want the same reporting infrastructure to consume data out of Salesforce. So our drivers can fit in there. So we've been around, as Paul's just said, with ODBC and JDBC for all the major relational databases. But with the continual growth of cloud data sources, we're addressing that. And again, from a SQL perspective, using ODBC and JDBC drivers. So here's a typical cross-section of some of the data sources out there. I'm not saying we support them all at the moment, but our intention or our dev manager is determined to get there soon. So with each data source in the cloud, the great majority of them connect by web services and so forth. So they may well not have a SQL interface. There is certainly not a wire protocol as there would be with Oracle, SQL Server or Sybase. So we have to engineer something that integrates the ODBC or the JDBC specification to the web interface, the web API and so forth. So that is the area that we're working to get that interface, the common interface. So all the tools that you're using, business objects, Cognos, can connect to data sources like Salesforce, MongoDB, and others. So it's not just reporting, ETL tools. You want to move data from SQL Server into Salesforce or from Salesforce into a data warehouse. So you can do stuff. And the common way of doing that at the moment, if it was a relational database, would be SQL. So coming to the cloud with SQL is what we're doing. So this is just an example of one of the drivers that we've got. We have both JDBC and an ODBC driver. For those that are aware of Salesforce, they've got Salesforce, but they've also got force.com and also database.com. So our Salesforce driver connects to all three data sources. But it's using standard SQL. It's SQL 92 compliant. So all the tools and querying and infrastructure that you're using for all your relational databases, you can continue to use with the cloud. We're using Salesforce as an example here. We've had this out for quite a while now. SQL is a great, very powerful querying tool. But you have to learn another language. You use a different API. And fine, that is if you're wanting to build an application using SQL. But if you're wanting to report, to provide query options and so forth, or use it from an ETL perspective. A SQL way is, when we were at a conference recently, and someone who didn't know about this had spent 2 months using Apex code to pull data from SQL Server into to Salesforce, where I believe we could have set up a quick query and it would have been done a lot quicker. So one of the things that we add in achieving the interface between Salesforce and the SQL and ODBC world, we can add various functionality that may well not be there in the existing API, because we engineer that to go off and we break it down into the correct code that the web API will accept. So Salesforce will accept certain code, and we can conjure up various SQL queries. So you've got a standards-based application issuing ODBC, JDBC, SQL. We have to intercept that and convert that into code that the web service will understand. So we're going to go through a little just bit of demo, nothing complicated, no very complex tool. It's just a simple, straightforward query tool. Use it. A lot of other tools can use it, lots of other reporting tools can use it, but this is just to demonstrate that the JDBC driver will work. One of the things on the bottom line is that, yes, you can actually go and query the Salesforce to give you statistics and information about the use of web service calls. So here's I'll talk about them and then I'll go and show them just to prove that these things do actually work. So we've got one there that's just bringing some table information, then some column information, and then we've got some remote calls on web services. So if you bear with me a second, for those that were here when the screen was up before, my mouse has disappeared. If anyone can see it. I really didn't want that. Can you see where my mouse is? It's frozen. No? I'll just see if I can provoke it. Oh, there we go. All right. No, my mouse is frozen. No. Just bear with me a second. I'm going to take that off there. I'm sure that's going to cause the projectionist a bit of a problem. Huh. Don't do demos. Sorry. Oh, she's woken back. No. I just want to get to that first line. No. This was working perfectly as always. Pardon? Oh, I wonder if here we go. I've got the other option. Right. So let's. I don't use this thing in a minute. It was you using it this morning, Paul. So let's just quickly go back and just go through. I think I might be able to do everything. So let's disconnect, and I'll just clear that. So I think we've got plenty of time. So one of the things that you first do is connect to a database. So here we're going to connect to Salesforce. There's all the connection options, and I'm now connected. So here it's brought back the 3 schemas, and I know that my data is in this schema, and I can go into the information up the top here and look at the system tables. So this has brought all that back. Since I connected, it's brought it all back. So it's doing standard metadata calls through JDBC, which are exactly or very similar to ODBC. So if your application is an ODBC or a JDBC compliant application, it will just work. So if I now go back to my script, he says, closing that out and going to the SQL Commander, and I'll open up some simple metadata calls. So it's down. He says with total confidence. Oh, sorry, I'm not using the mouse. There we go, metadata call. So the screen resolution on this is well, this is kind of frustrating. So let's go to, I'm going to see if that's gone and got cleared out for some reason. Save mode. Okay, I'm sorry, the metadata calls, I'll have to come back in a minute. So here's one where we're doing a select against tables. So if we wanted to get all the tables back from Salesforce, and I'm very sorry about this, the screen resolution is there some way of changing the screen resolution? No? Okay. So you'll have to believe me that all the tables are there. What I can do is go over here, and it shows a bit more. So the tables are there, and I would have clicked on the column names for there. So if I click on that one there, I can go into the column names. So for anyone that knows Salesforce, you're accessing, I hope there's people up there that have used Salesforce and understand that, so that you can actually see that any query tool, be it ODBC and JDBC, you've got access to do that. I'm going to there do another one here. So here we're now going to look at some remote sessions. This is regarding the web services. And again, this is very frustrating because there's only a couple of lines. But you can see here that the web service calls are very small, and we'll go back to that towards the end. And you can see the selection idea. So, oh, I didn't unclick the line. I had an idea there. Oh, I didn't do them both, sorry. There we go. So again, you can see that the web service calls are small and started. If I'd have managed to do the others, it would have been okay. Let's see now. I can't even see. I think we might have seen that one already, but let's just... Yeah. So, sorry. Come on. I'm going to click there. No, it's gone. Yeah, we know that. Table reports. We've done those already, so I'll cut to the chase. And one other thing that I think I talked about earlier is you can by just having a very simple, this is for people that are aware that that is a title of some of my tasks that I've done before. So if I run that, that is actually a Salesforce report that I'm now going to call, and of course that could be called from an application. You could do a metadata call and pull back the information and have a list of reports, and then you could click on the reports and run it as a stored procedure, and it will just bring the data back. So for analysts and the like that don't want to be involved with working out how to build reports, they can use data like this quite quickly. And I will talk and talk. So I'm sorry for the problems with the mouse. On the left-hand side there's all the tables and so forth. And I think we're not going to even succeed with that one. That should have finished by now. So I'm just going to terminate that. I'll just try and do one more. See. Oh, I've lost my connection. So yeah, so I'm sorry, that's the problem. I'm not going to go on. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. One of the things that you can also do is a cache. Within our driver, we have the capability of having a local cache. So when you're pulling large volumes of data back, and a great majority of it is static data that you don't need to change, there's no reason to keep pulling it back with multiple queries. So you can pull it into the cache, and only when the cache time is out, it could be a minute, an hour, or a day, you would go back and get a refreshed data. Of course, if you update any data that you've pulled back, that will push it back to the cache, but then also push it back to Salesforce. And if there's any query that the data is time-stamped, some of it outside the time of the cache or inside, the stuff inside the cache will not be re-pulled, but that outside the timestamp, it will go and pull it back. Now I'm pushing my luck to see if this one will work. So this is Heroku, as you can see on the top there. This is a development platform that Salesforce provide. The purpose of doing this is that it's just to demonstrate, hopefully, that a query will go and run, and then if you enforce the cache, you will then see the time coming down. So let's see if we can get something to work. So here's a reasonably complicated query with joins and the like. We just did something. Thank you. Yeah. Sorry, the mouse is just not performing. I think we're all right, aren't we? I'll try one more and undo. You're a mouse man. No? No. Yep, coming back. Can you just grab hold of that and stick that? No more of it. No, it's just... Go on, you have a go. The Hadoop. No, down one. That's it, yeah. So this is now got. I think that's correct. Yep. So if you now submit that, so that's hopefully if that connects. I think we may well have lost connectivity. No, there we go. No, it's failing because I think we've lost connectivity. So after this, we will go back to our standard, and I will run it on a different connection. So, apologies for that. It's been running perfectly for a while. So, has anyone got any questions about what I haven't just demonstrated to you? That'll be a no then. So, let's just move on. The final bit that we hopefully will work, because it's only in PowerPoint, is that okay, so we've got all these data sources, and typically a data source from the likes of Salesforce and others, they change their API every 3 or 4 times a year. So corporates and organizations are then being given the benefit of the cloud, but then having to maintain APIs and the like back on ground in the premise. So what would be good is to have some form of a service. So what Progress DataDirect are not only building the various JDBC and ODBC drivers for all these cloud sources, they're saying, right, well, do we really want to go and do multiple connections to multiple applications? Is there not a better way of resolving that? Having some form of connectivity as a service. So again, we are going to be building all these JDBC and ODBC drivers for direct connections, but then we will add a connectivity managed layer. So from my app to the cloud, there will be just one driver, be it ODBC and JDBC. Above the green DataDirect cloud, we'll manage, as a managed service, the connectivity to the various data sources. So if Salesforce changes its API or MongoDB has an update, the person down on the ground with the application, they will only need to worry about making sure that their application is making the benefit of all the latest increases in APIs. But we will manage all the connectivity in the cloud itself. So it's going to be a managed service. So we just have that one connectivity source. Now, moving on 6 months, 9 months, on the left-hand side, we've got the ODBC and the JDBC driver going into all the analytical tools, all the ETL tools. But the great move to mobile connectivity, such as iPhones and the like, we are developing other APIs that are more relevant for iPhones and the like. So the mobile devices will still be able to connect to DataDirect Cloud, connect into their Salesforce account or into another CRM system through the cloud. And also from the cloud, we're going to have connectors that go off to other cloud platforms like Azure and Force.com. So over the next 6-9 months, you're going to see a lot of activity, both from the point of view of us supplying drivers directly, ODBC and JDBC drivers for the data sources that you see in the cloud there, but also then adding this extra layer of managed service for DataDirect Cloud. So I think that's the end of what I've got to say. Are there any other questions? I turned that off. Sorry. Huh. I do apologise about that. Go away. Ignore. So, did it? I'll get a hand put up. How many people understood the benefits of a cloud JDBC and ODBC drivers? Anyone? Yep. Good. So at least without the demo, and as I said, I'll do it with a normal mouse and everything at our stand afterwards. And the idea and the concept of the managed service for where you've got multiple data sources, is that something that is perceived as useful, or you're not there yet? Any hands up? No? So that's something. Oh, there's a few, so that's good. So I do apologise for the demo. As Paul will tell you, I've been doing it all day today. It worked before we actually plugged into the projector. I don't know, it's something to do with resolution change, I believe. But I've got to blame someone.
It worked when we had connectivity, I promise.
Yeah. So I'm sorry it was a bit interrupted, but hopefully our connectivity at the stand will be okay, and we can find out. So got a little bit of time left. For no more questions, I think we'll call it a day. Okay.
And I was just going to say, we do have wired connectivity at the booth. So if you want to stop by our booth, we could show you this at the booth, do a demo for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
How many people do query? Oh, well, now we've got a couple of minutes left. How many people do report on Salesforce and the like? There were a few hands earlier that you've got Salesforce. Are you just using the standard Salesforce reporting capabilities, or do you pull data into other things like Excel or other Java tools? No hands going up. So are you all reporting with the standard Salesforce reporting? Yeah. So you're not needing to pull data into corporate-wide reporting mechanisms like business objects or Cognos. No. I think that is something that is coming, and it's here because we've got a number of customers that are doing just that. They've already got business objects, Cognos, Informatica and that, and they want to be able to pull in the data and deal with Salesforce data in a similar way to relational data.
Especially with BI applications, we've seen Oracle Business Intelligence Enterprise Edition, Informatica, an ETL application. We have customers using that with our Salesforce drivers. So if you think of some of your applications that you're using, whether it's JDBC or ODBC, it might be interesting to think, hey, if I could just plug an ODBC driver or JDBC driver in there and connect to Salesforce. And, you know, we make Salesforce look like SQL Server, Oracle, or DB2, or any of the other databases that most folks are familiar with, those familiar relational databases. It's kind of interesting to think of the possibilities if you could just plug a driver in instead of having to either purchase or create your own proprietary layer to Salesforce. We kind of do that for you. So kind of you might want to think like in the bigger picture in your environment, like are there applications where it would be useful to be able to connect directly to that Salesforce data, get closer to that data and be able to use it. And one other thing I did want to mention that one of our recent releases, actually, we just released on the 31st of October, so I guess it was a couple weeks ago, our ODBC driver for Hadoop. So you can connect any of those enterprise-level SQL applications with ODBC to Hadoop and look at your big data, whether it's structured or unstructured. We connect through Hive to Hadoop. So if you have ODBC applications and you're using Hadoop, I know a lot of folks are in the first stages and haven't quite have their infrastructure exactly planned out yet. It is one way to really expedite those enterprise level application connectivity to the structured and unstructured data in Hadoop.
Okay.
That's it. Okay.
Well, thank you very much for putting up for a non-presentation or demonstration anyway. Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.